If a man has ever truly been seen by a woman, not just touched, not admired, not desired, but seen, then losing her is not an ordinary loss. It is the beginning of a haunting. Stay with me until the end of this video, because once you understand what it means for a man to lose the woman who understood his shadow, you'll begin to see why some men never recover. She wasn't the most beautiful woman in the room, not the loudest, not the one who offered comfort without question. No, she was the one who could look through the performance, straight into the darkness he tried to hide from the world, and still remain. She didn't flinch at the parts of him that others turned from. She recognized the fracture behind the smile, the grief beneath the anger, the little boy inside the man who had never truly been held for who he was, only for who he pretended to be. And that is precisely why he let her go. Not because she wasn't enough, but because her love was too precise, too real, too exposing. Because when a woman mirrors a man's shadow back to him without judgment, without retreat, he is faced with something more terrifying than abandonment. He is faced with the truth. Jung taught that the shadow is everything we deny in ourselves. The rage, the weakness, the envy, the shame. And most men, conditioned by a world that demands strength without softness, spend their lives running from that shadow. They build empires, seduce women, chase status, not for power, but for distraction. But she was different. She did not demand his perfection. She invited his wholeness. And in doing so, she became dangerous to his illusions. You see, he had never met someone who could speak to his silence, who could rest in his storms. Her presence was unnerving, not because she was unstable, but because she was unshakably still. She did not try to fix him. She simply saw him. And for a moment, he glimpsed what it might feel like to be fully known. But that kind of intimacy is not soft. It is searing. It burns through the masks. And when a man is not ready to lay down the armor, he runs. He self-sabotages. He labels her too intense, too emotional, too close. He chooses the woman who praises his light but never questions his darkness. The one who loves his potential but never challenges his pattern. The one who keeps the mirror dim. And then he loses the woman who held the truth of him. Not because she slammed the door, but because he refused to open it. And now, years may pass. His life may be filled with noise, new lovers, accolades, but her absence is a quiet echo in every room. Not loud enough to disturb the surface, but deep enough to haunt the soul. Because the psyche never forgets the moment it was seen. He may not speak of her. He may not even admit what she was. But in his most honest moments, when the noise dies, when the mirrors break, he remembers, not just her, but who he was in her gaze. And that is the wound. Not that she left, but that he left himself when he pushed her away. This is the deepest regret of a man, not the woman he couldn't have, but the woman he had and couldn't face himself enough to keep. Because you cannot hold a woman who sees your shadow if you're still hiding from it. And once she walks, she never begs, she never explains. She knows her worth too well to stay where truth is feared. There's something irrevocable about that kind of loss. It doesn't tear through your life like a storm. It settles in like winter, quiet, gray, lingering. The kind of loss that seeps into your mornings, your silences, your unfinished sentences, the kind of loss that follows you, not like a ghost, but like a mirror you can no longer shatter. Because that woman wasn't just another chapter. She was the page where you started to become real. And now, with her gone, there is no one left who speaks the language of your shadow. You told yourself she was too much, too deep, too knowing. You said you needed space, freedom, simplicity. But what you were really saying was, I am not ready to be seen. And now that she's gone, you find yourself surrounded by women who don't ask the dangerous questions, who smile and nod but never look beneath your words, who touch your body but never find your soul. And still, she lingers. Not in your inbox, not in your call history, but in your dreams. In the split-second hesitation before you laugh at a joke that isn't funny. In the aching when someone touches your skin, but you feel nothing underneath. Because she is no longer a person in your life. She is an archetype etched into your psyche. Carl Jung would tell us, the feminine is not merely a lover, it is the anima, the soul's bridge to the unconscious. When you met her, you met a version of yourself that had been buried for years beneath bravado and boyhood wounds. And for a moment, just one, you wanted to rise, to become the man her gaze believed you could be. But transformation demands surrender, and surrender, for the man addicted to control, feels like death. So you ran. You chose comfort over confrontation, pattern over presence. The same cycle dressed in different faces. You told yourself she was dramatic, or unstable, or too intense. But those were lies wrapped in projection. Because she wasn't too much. She was right on time. You were just too small for your own becoming. And now, she's not angry. She's not bitter. She's not even waiting. She's gone, not in distance, but in dimension. She no longer lives in the emotional landscape where your avoidance is accepted. She no longer dwells in the narrative where her love is a tool to fix you. She has stepped beyond the loop, into sovereignty, into stillness, into the version of herself that no longer explains her value to those who cannot hold it. And you are left with the echo of the woman who didn't just love you, she saw you. Not your resume, not your reputation, you. And if you've ever had that kind of love, you know that no amount of casual intimacy or adoration will ever feel like enough again. Because nothing touches the soul like recognition. Nothing wounds the soul like its absence. This is why some men seem to lose their shine after her. They still move, still smile, still succeed, but something in them dulls because that woman lit a flame in places they didn't even know were cold. And when she left, she took nothing except the illusion. And in its place, she left a question that no distraction can drown out. Why did I let her go? That question becomes a companion. Not loud, not punishing, just there, sitting quietly behind your moments of triumph, behind the shoulder of every woman you meet who doesn't quite see you the way she did. You try to move on. You try to forget. But the soul doesn't move on from awakening. It waits. It waits for you to catch up to the truth you once ran from. And here's the deeper wound. It wasn't just her you lost. You lost the you that came alive in her presence. The man you almost became. The man who softened, who listened, who dared to face himself. You touched that man briefly, He existed for a flicker of time in her arms, in her gaze, in her quiet faith in your becoming. But when you let her go, you buried him again. Now, you wear your armor a little tighter. You speak with a bit more certainty, but less conviction. You entertain new women, but none reach the chamber she once held. Because the wound isn't about missing her body, it's about mourning your own possibility. She wasn't perfect. No, she had her storms. Her silence could be brutal, her presence, at times, overwhelming. But she was true, and when someone gives you truth, unpolished, unfiltered, unwavering, it stays in your bones. Carl Jung warned us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. She was your invitation to do just that. To make the unconscious conscious. To face the demons you inherited from your father. To name the wounds your mother never held. To look at the boy in you that still flinched at love and called it survival. But fate requires courage, and in the absence of that courage, you chose the familiar, the easy, the safe. And now, every comfortable relationship feels like a cage. Not because of who she is, but because of who you're not when you're with her. She was the mirror, not a fantasy, not a muse, a mirror. And in that reflection, you glimpsed your soul, but it terrified you. So she let you go. Not with a dramatic exit, not with ultimatums, but with sacred stillness. She simply stopped trying to be chosen by a man who hadn't chosen himself. She didn't need to hate you to leave. She only needed to love herself enough not to wait. And now, what remains is the memory of that gaze, the one that didn't flinch when your mask slipped, the one that stayed soft when you showed her your worst, the one that said, without words, I see you, all of you, and I'm still here. Do you know what it means to lose that gaze? It means you walk the earth half seen, even in the arms of women who adore your surface. It means you find success, but not satisfaction. Sex, but not surrender. You get attention, but not recognition. Because the man who was once seen by a woman who understood his shadow is marked forever. He carries the weight of what could have been if only he'd stayed. Of who he might have become if he'd allowed her light to reach the parts he buried. But now, her light is no longer yours. She has turned it inward. She no longer watches for your evolution. She is tending to her own. And if you meet her again, and you might, it won't be the same. She will smile, perhaps. But the part of her that once stayed open for you will be closed. Not in bitterness, but in completion. She has become the woman you once feared, and now, the woman you'll never forget. Not because she seeks vengeance, but because she no longer needs anything from you. Not even understanding, especially not closure. She has turned her pain into prophecy, her waiting into wisdom. And what you mistook for silence was transformation happening in real time. You thought you left her behind, but what really happened is she outgrew the version of herself that once needed you to see her. And now, she doesn't speak your name with longing. She doesn't search your eyes for softness. She doesn't shape her worth around your perception. She's become a world unto herself. And the woman who once held space for your shadow now holds space for her sovereignty. Jung knew the danger of underestimating the feminine unconscious. He knew that when a woman integrates her capacity to feel with her capacity to see, when she stops collapsing herself to keep others comfortable, she becomes untouchable. Not because she's unreachable, but because she's unshakable. You could once penetrate her heart with fragments of affection. Now, even your full attention would not move her. And this is the paradox that breaks men in silence. You don't realize it was real until she's gone. You don't understand that her depth was love until all you're left with is surface. You don't know you were seen until you find yourself surrounded by eyes that only reflect your image, not your truth. There is no going back. You can try. You can send the messages. You can reminisce, recall, rewind. But the woman who understood your shadow is no longer trying to reach the man who refused to hold it. She has risen into her own mirror, her own myth, her own meaning. And you are left to reckon with the wound you didn't have the courage to name, that what she gave you was rare, and what you gave her was resistance. It was never about needing to be perfect. She never asked that. She would have stayed through the rage, the sorrow, the silence, if only you had stayed present in it. If only you had said, "Yes, this is who I am, and I want to meet myself, no matter how painful it is." But you didn't. And so now, years from now, you'll still think of her when someone touches your shoulder the way she used to. When a phrase she once said comes back to you in the voice of another. When a moment of stillness arrives, and you feel that tightening in your chest. Not anxiety, but absence. The absence of what was real. And here is the final blow, the one no man ever sees coming. She doesn't hate you. She doesn't wish you harm. In fact, she still hopes, quietly, from afar, that you finally meet yourself one day. Not for her, but for you. Because what she offered wasn't just a relationship. It was a mirror. And what she mourned wasn't just your love. It was the loss of the man you almost became. She doesn't blame you for your wounds. She only regrets that you chose to protect them over transforming them. And that is what makes her unforgettable. Not the way she touched you, but the way she awakened you to the man you could have been, to the soul you abandoned, to the light you weren't ready to receive. So now, you stand where many men have stood before you, on the edge of memory, staring into a life you can no longer enter. Not because the door is locked, but because it was never meant to remain open forever. Love, especially the kind that sees into your darkness, is a sacred invitation, not a guarantee. It is not yours by default. It is yours by devotion. And devotion was what she offered. Not as a performance, but as a prayer. She was not trying to fix you. She was offering you a place to become. She did not demand that you arrive healed, only that you arrive honest. But honesty was the price you weren't ready to pay. So now you live with echoes instead of answers, with moments instead of movement, and with the realization that the deepest regret of a man is not rejection. It's recognition. Realizing too late that someone once held your entire soul in her gaze and still stayed, until you made staying impossible. Jung wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." She was transformation, not a detour, not a lesson, a portal. And in losing her, you did not just lose a lover. You lost access to a version of yourself that only existed in her presence. You'll find others. Of course you will. But they won't ask for your soul. They'll settle for your charm. They won't meet your silence with stillness. They'll fill it with noise. And every time you feel that dissonance, that ache behind the laughter, that numbness after intimacy, you'll remember. Not because you want to, but because truth leaves a scar. And she was the truth. She no longer looks back. Not because she's cold, but because she's complete. You no longer live in her prayers. Not because she's hardened, but because she's healed. She no longer waits for you to rise. Not because she's abandoned you, but because she finally chose to rise for herself. And that is what you could never offer her, a man who was rising too. So now, let this ache do what her presence once tried to do. Awaken you. Let it burn through your resistance. Let it dismantle the illusion that love is something to earn through performance or power. Let it return you to yourself. The man who survives this grief is the man who decides to finally see his shadow, not as shame, but as soil, as the raw material for something holy, for someone whole. And maybe, one day, you'll become the man she always saw hidden beneath your fear, not to win her back, but to finally become yours. Because the deepest regret of a man is not losing a woman who understood his darkness. It is losing the woman who could love him through it, because he refused to face it himself. And the woman who knows her worth doesn't wait. She remembers. She remembers who she is. She remembers where she's going. And she remembers that the man who couldn't meet her there was never truly hers to lose. If this message stirred something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more soul-deep truths rooted in psychology, power, and feminine awakening.